Let's be real. How many of you have ever felt taken for granted? You give, you show up, you invest, and what do you get? A guy who assumes you'll always be there no matter what. Now, here's the truth. People don't appreciate what they think they can't lose. And that, my friends, is where the game changes. You see, human nature is wired in a very interesting way. We only value something when we fear losing it. Think about it. Why do people suddenly chase after an ex when they realize they're moving on? Because loss creates urgency, and urgency creates appreciation. So what does that mean for you? It means you can't tell someone to value you. You have to show them why they should. And that starts with shifting your focus from convincing him to teaching him. A lot of people think that the way to fix a relationship is by explaining themselves. They sit him down, pour their heart out, and say, I just don't feel appreciated. But here's the problem. If someone is used to having you around no matter what, words don't change anything, actions do. If you always answer his calls, stop. If you always rearrange your schedule for him, don't. If he assumes you'll always be available, create space. Let him feel your absence. And in that absence, he'll start to recognize what he's missing. There's nothing more attractive than someone who is so focused on their own life that they don't have time to chase after someone who isn't showing up for them. When you invest in yourself, your happiness, your growth, your passions, you send a powerful message. I am the prize. When a man sees that you are thriving with or without him, he starts to realize that his place in your life is not a guarantee. And that right there is where the shift happens. Think about the most desirable things in life. Luxury brands, VIP access, front row seats. What do they all have in common? They're rare. They're not easily accessible. And because of that, people work harder to have them. Now apply this to relationships. If you are constantly available, always saying yes, and never setting boundaries, you become too easy to access. And what happens when something is too easy to access? People don't value it. I'm not saying you should play games. I'm saying you should create healthy boundaries. Stop overgiving. Stop over-explaining. Stop trying to prove your worth. When you step back and show that your time is precious, he will start to respect it. The most powerful lessons in life don't come from someone nagging us. They come from experience. If he takes you for granted and nothing changes, he learns that his behavior is okay. But if his actions lead to real consequences, like you pulling away, focusing on yourself, or even walking away, he feels the loss. And here's the kicker. The right man will adjust. The wrong man will blame you. And that tells you everything you need to know. A woman who knows her worth is magnetic. She doesn't beg. She doesn't chase. She doesn't settle. And because of that, men respect her. You don't have to make someone love you by overgiving. You don't have to force someone to appreciate you by staying longer than you should. All you have to do is show up as your best self, and if he doesn't see your value, trust me, someone else will. Absence is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships. It is the space in which realization happens, the silence that amplifies meaning, and the void that forces reflection. When you are always present, always accessible, always available, people become accustomed to your presence. They begin to expect it as a given, not as a privilege. They start to see your effort as routine rather than a choice. And human nature, being what it is, often takes for granted what is constantly within reach. The true test of your value in someone's life is not in how they behave when you are always there, but in how they react when you step away. The moment you remove yourself from a situation where you were once a constant, something shifts. Suddenly, the messages that were left unread now seem urgent. The calls that once felt optional become necessary. The little things you did, the check-ins, the thoughtful gestures, the emotional support become painfully obvious in their absence. The person who once dismissed your presence as something ordinary begins to recognize just how much of a role you played. Absence forces a reckoning. When you take a step back, you create space for someone to experience life without you. And in that space, they are left to ask themselves questions they may have ignored. Was I taking them for granted? Was I assuming they would always be there? Did I put in the same level of effort they did? The reason this works is because it disrupts complacency. People settle into patterns, and those patterns create a false sense of security. If you are always the one to initiate, to fix things, to be emotionally available, they begin to assume that this dynamic is just how it is. But when you remove yourself, the equilibrium is broken. The balance they took for granted is no longer there. This is why stepping back is not about playing games. It's about allowing people the opportunity to reflect on what they had. It is not about punishment, but about perspective. When you are too close to something, you can't see its full value. Think about a painting in a museum. If you stand too close, all you see are the brushstrokes, the details, but you miss the bigger picture. It's only when you step back that you can appreciate the full masterpiece. The same is true in relationships. Distance provides clarity. Moreover, absence has a way of revealing priorities. If someone truly values you, they will feel your absence and make an effort to close that gap. If they don't, they will let the distance remain. This is a hard truth, but a necessary one. It is not your job to convince someone to appreciate you. It is not your responsibility to teach someone how to cherish your presence. The only way they learn is by experiencing what life is like without you in it. When you step back, you also give yourself the chance to evaluate the situation from a new perspective. You begin to see whether your presence was genuinely appreciated or merely expected. You notice if the relationship was balanced or if you were carrying most of the weight. This newfound clarity empowers you to make better decisions, not from a place of emotion, but from a place of understanding. Absence is also a tool for self-respect. It sends a clear message. My time, my energy, and my love are valuable. And when something is valuable, it is not given freely to those who do not recognize its worth. This shift in mindset is powerful. It changes the dynamic from one where you are constantly giving to one where you allow the other person to step up and show you what you mean to them. This is why the power of absence should never be underestimated. It is not about manipulation. It is about allowing the natural course of realization to take place. It is about creating the space for someone to truly see you, to understand what you brought into their life, and to decide what they are willing to do about it. Your standards are not just guidelines. They are the blueprint for how people treat you. In every interaction, you are teaching others what is acceptable and what is not. The way you allow someone to behave in your presence becomes the standard they will continue to follow. If you tolerate inconsistency, they will assume it is acceptable. If you allow disrespect, they will believe you will always forgive it. But if you set firm boundaries and uphold them, you shape the way they treat you, not through words, but through action. Respect does not begin with someone else choosing to give it. It begins with you. This is not about issuing ultimatums or making threats. It is about living in a way that communicates, this is what I accept and nothing less. When you enforce your boundaries, you send a powerful message. I respect myself enough not to tolerate anything that makes me feel unworthy. The reality is that people will always push limits to see what they can get away with, not necessarily out of malice, but because we are all wired to seek comfort and convenience. If someone can put in less effort and still get the same reward, why would they do more? This is why your standards matter. They create the structure that forces people to step up. If a man knows he can disappear for days, come back with a casual apology, and still be welcomed with open arms, why would he change? If he realizes he can cancel plans last minute, avoid emotional accountability, or give you half-hearted effort without consequence, why would he suddenly start treating you better? The truth is, he won't. because there's no reason to. On the other hand, when you establish boundaries, when you make it clear that certain behaviors are simply not acceptable, you force him to either rise to meet your standards or remove himself from the equation. And that is a good thing, because a man who respects you will adjust his behavior, while a man who only values convenience will walk away. Setting standards is not about controlling someone else. It is about maintaining control over yourself, over your energy, your emotions, and your self-worth. It is about recognizing that you do not have to beg for effort, plead for respect, or convince someone to appreciate you. The right person will do it because they recognize your value, not because you had to prove it to them. A key part of setting standards is consistency. Boundaries that are only enforced sometimes are not boundaries, they are suggestions. If you say you will not tolerate being ignored, but then you excuse it when it happens, you are teaching that your words do not carry weight. If you say you need a partner who is emotionally available, but then you continue to entertain someone who shuts down every time there is a real conversation, you are showing that your standards are flexible. People believe what you show them, not what you tell them. If you allow behavior that disrespects you, they will assume you are okay with it. But when you uphold your standards, even when it is difficult, even when it means walking away, you establish yourself as someone who values themselves too much to settle, and something incredible happens when you do this. The right people take notice. The man who truly values you will respect your boundaries because he understands that they are a reflection of your self-worth. He will meet your standards not because he has to, but because he wants to. Your standards are not just about him, they are about you. They define how you see yourself, how you carry yourself, and ultimately how you allow others to treat you. When you hold yourself to a higher standard, the world follows suit. Scarcity creates value. It's a fundamental law of human psychology. People desire what feels exclusive, what isn't easily accessible, what they can't just have whenever they want. When something is rare, it becomes precious. When something is always available, it fades into the background, taken for granted, assumed to be permanent. This applies to material things, to opportunities, and most importantly, to relationships. Think about luxury brands. The reason people spend thousands on certain bags or watches isn't just because they're well made, it's because they're scarce. Limited editions, long wait lists, the difficulty of obtaining them, it all makes the item feel special. The same principle applies to how you are perceived in a relationship. If you're always available, always responding instantly, always saying yes, you lose that air of exclusivity. He assumes you always will be. And because of that, he stops feeling the need to work for your attention. When you position yourself as someone who is not always accessible, you naturally elevate your worth in his eyes. This isn't about playing games or trying to manipulate someone's perception. It's about maintaining a sense of independence, a life outside of him, and an energy that suggests, I am not someone who just sits around waiting to be chosen. People crave what they fear losing. When he starts to notice that you aren't readily available at all times, he starts to wonder where you are, what you're doing, and who you're with. That curiosity, that slight uncertainty, fuels attraction. It makes him realize that he can't just assume your presence, he has to earn it. And that's the key difference. A woman who is constantly available is a woman who can be taken for granted. A woman who has boundaries, who doesn't drop everything at a moment's notice, who is selective with her time, that is a woman who commands respect. Scarcity doesn't mean ignoring him, avoiding him, or being distant just for the sake of it. It means having a life that is full, a schedule that doesn't revolve around him, and priorities that extend beyond the relationship. It means not being the first to respond every single time, not always adjusting your plans to accommodate his, and not waiting by the phone just to prove your loyalty. When you create space, something interesting happens. He starts to feel the absence. He starts to wonder if he's as important to you as you are to him. That uncertainty makes him value you more, because suddenly your presence is no longer something he can just expect. It's something he has to work for. Men, like anyone else, appreciate what they invest effort into. If he knows that your time is precious, that your attention isn't given away freely, he will respect it. But if he feels like he can show up whenever he wants, without consequence, he will start treating you as an option rather than a priority. This is why the law of scarcity is so powerful. It forces a shift in dynamics. Instead of you chasing validation, you become the one being pursued. Instead of him feeling certain that you'll always be there, he starts to feel the need to step up. Being less available doesn't mean being cold. It means being intentional. It means making sure that the energy and effort you give are reciprocated. It means recognizing that your time and presence are privileges, not entitlements. A high-value woman understands that the more accessible she makes herself, the more she risks being overlooked. She doesn't need to beg for attention or demand respect. She simply sets the tone through her actions. She shows that she is someone worth valuing because she values herself first. Words can be powerful, but actions will always carry more weight. You can tell someone 1,000 times how you want to be treated, but if there are no consequences for their behavior, those words will eventually lose meaning. People don't truly learn from conversations, they learn from experiences. They learn when something shifts, when something changes, when they feel the impact of their choices in a way that words alone could never convey. This is especially true in relationships. If you keep telling him, I need more effort, I deserve respect, I want to feel valued, but you stay exactly where you are, accepting the same patterns, your words become background noise. He hears them, but he doesn't feel them. And people only change when they feel the loss of what they took for granted. The reality is, comfort breeds complacency. If he knows that no matter what he does, whether he puts in effort or not, whether he prioritizes you or not, you'll always be there, then there's no urgency to change. Why would he adjust his behavior if nothing is at risk? Why would he step up if there's no real consequence for stepping down? This is why action matters more than words. Instead of explaining why he should appreciate you, show him what it's like when you stop being so available. Stop making excuses for his behavior. Stop engaging in endless conversations about what he needs to do differently. Stop trying to teach him with words alone. Because the truth is, he already knows what he should be doing. He just hasn't felt the need to do it. But when you pull back, when you stop initiating, when you no longer remind him of the effort he's supposed to be giving, that's when the lesson begins. He starts to notice the shift. The energy that once surrounded him, the attention he could always count on, the effort that made him feel secure, it's no longer freely given. And that absence speaks louder than anything you could ever say. People don't wake up until they have to. It's easy to take someone for granted when they're always there, always forgiving, always trying. But the moment that stops, the moment you remove yourself from the equation, it forces a realization. She was adding something to my life that I didn't even notice until it was gone. And here's the key. This isn't about playing games or manipulating him into action. It's about self-respect. It's about recognizing when your effort is being wasted on someone who isn't meeting you halfway. It's about teaching through experience rather than when you step back, one of two things will happen. Either he will realize what he stands to lose and correct his behavior, or he won't, and that will tell you everything you need to know. Both outcomes are a win. Either he steps up because he values you, or he reveals that he was never going to. Either way, you save yourself from wasting time on someone who isn't truly invested. This is why action is the most powerful teacher. Words can be ignored, promises can be made and broken, But the absence of what was once freely given, that is undeniable, that is felt, and that is what forces real change. Respect starts with you. The way you treat yourself sets the standard for how others treat you. When you carry yourself with self-respect, when you move with confidence, when you hold firm to your boundaries, when you show that you know your worth, you naturally command respect from those around you. It's not about demanding it, begging for it, or proving yourself. It's about embodying it so completely that people have no choice but to take notice. Think about the people you admire, the ones who walk into a room and instantly draw attention. It's not because they are the loudest. It's not because they are the most desperate for validation. It's because they have a presence that says, I know who I am. I don't need anyone's approval to feel valuable. That kind of energy is magnetic. And in relationships, it is the difference between being cherished and being taken for granted. A person who respects themselves does not settle for half-hearted effort. They don't tolerate being treated as an afterthought. They don't bend over backward to prove their worth to someone who isn't reciprocating. Instead, they recognize when someone's actions aren't aligned with what they deserve, and they remove themselves accordingly. This is what makes self-respect so powerful. It creates a natural boundary between you and the people who would take you for granted. It filters out those who aren't willing to meet your standards. It forces others to step up if they want to be in your life because they understand that you won't settle for anything less. And here's the beautiful thing. When you prioritize yourself, you don't lose people who truly care about you. You lose the ones who are only there because they could get away with giving you less. The people who genuinely value you will be drawn closer, not pushed away. They will respect you more, not less, because deep down, people admire strength, they admire confidence, they admire someone who knows their worth and refuses to compromise it. This doesn't mean being arrogant or acting superior. True self-respect isn't about looking down on others. It's about holding yourself up. It's about knowing that your time, your energy, and your love are valuable, and you will only invest them in people who appreciate them. Confidence is irresistible. It's not about being perfect. It's not about never having doubts. It's about carrying yourself in a way that says, I am enough as I am. I don't need external validation to feel whole. That kind of self-assuredness changes the way people see you. It shifts the dynamic in your relationships. It ensures that you are treated with the level of care and appreciation you deserve. But the moment you start compromising your self-respect to keep someone in your life, you send a message, my worth depends on you. And the problem with that is, if someone senses that you don't fully value yourself, why would they? If you tolerate disrespect, why would they feel the need to change? This is why the most powerful thing you can do is to set the tone. Show people how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. Make it clear that you are a person of value, not through words, not through lectures, but through your actions. Through the way you carry yourself, the way you set boundaries, the way you walk away from anything that doesn't align with your self-worth. Because at the end of the day, respect isn't something you have to beg for. It's something you command by the way you live, by the way you show up for yourself, by the way you refuse to accept anything less than what you deserve. And the people who are meant to be in your life, they will rise to meet that standard. Growth never happens in comfort. When someone is too comfortable, they have no reason to change, no reason to reflect, no reason to push themselves beyond their current habits. And in relationships, this can be dangerous. If you constantly make things easy for him, if you're always there, always forgiving, always the one making the effort, he will have no reason to step up. No reason to grow, no reason to realize what he stands to lose. This is why sometimes the most powerful lesson you can teach is through absence. Words can only do so much. Conversations can only go so far, but real learning happens when someone feels the consequences of their actions. If he knows that no matter how little effort he puts in, you'll always be there, then what motivation does he have to change? Why would he adjust his behavior if there's no discomfort, no real cost to his neglect? People don't grow when things are easy. They grow when things get hard, and the hardest lesson to learn is realizing that someone you took for granted is no longer there, that the warmth you once felt has disappeared, that the effort, the love, the presence you assumed would always be available is now missing. This isn't about playing games or manipulating him into action. It's about recognizing when you've given too much, when you've overcompensated for his lack of effort, when you've made things too easy for him. Love is not about doing all the work while the other person sits back and enjoys the benefit. A real relationship requires mutual effort, mutual growth, mutual investment. But if he isn't willing to grow, then you have a choice. You can continue making excuses for his behavior, continue lowering your standards, continue handing out unlimited chances, or you can step back and let him feel what it's like to live without your presence. Let him experience the gap that your absence creates. Let him sit with the reality of what he has lost, because only then does he have the opportunity to grow. Only then does he have the space to reflect. Only then does he realize that effort is not optional, that love is not something to be taken for granted, that comfort is a privilege, not a guarantee. If he truly values you, he will rise to meet your standards. He will recognize what he had and adjust his behavior accordingly. But if he lets you walk away without a fight, then that tells you everything you need to know. That tells you that he was never going to change, that he was never truly invested, that he was only comfortable as long as you were the one making all the effort. And that realization, as painful as it may be, is a gift, because it frees you. It frees you from waiting for someone to grow when they have no intention of doing so. It frees you from lowering yourself to accommodate someone who is never willing to rise. It frees you from pouring your energy into a relationship that was built on your effort alone. Growth is never easy. It requires discomfort, reflection, and sometimes loss. But it is necessary. And if walking away is what it takes for him to grow, whether that means growing into the person who fights for you or growing apart so you can find someone who will, then so be it. Because your role is not to force his growth. Your role is to demand the respect and effort you deserve. And if he truly values you, he will prove it. Not through words, not through empty promises, but through action. At the end of the day, the way someone treats you is a direct reflection of what they believe they can get away with. If you continue to give, to forgive, to accommodate, without ever holding them accountable, they will assume they don't need to change. Comfort breeds complacency. And if you make things too easy, too predictable, too unconditional, without reciprocity, they will take you for granted. Not because they are necessarily bad people, but because human nature leans toward convenience. The most powerful lesson you can teach is not through words, not through pleading, and certainly not through waiting for them to wake up one day and realize your worth. It is through action, through walking away when necessary, through valuing yourself so much that they have no choice but to do the same or lose the privilege of being in your life. If someone truly cares, they will step up. They will recognize the space you've left behind and do the work to fill it. They will learn that love is not about taking, but about mutual effort, respect, and appreciation. And if they don't, then they were never meant to hold a place in your life to begin with. Either way, you win. Because choosing yourself, demanding more, and refusing to settle is never a loss. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. And when you respect yourself, the right people will too.